Hey there, it's me again, Michelle, and welcome back to the Canadian History, a Chronology channel. Today's episode, number 36, continues with the rebellions of 1837. This is part 3, and will be the last episode in this mini-series. Now, as usual, before starting, let's take a quick moment to review what we saw in the last episode. And as a reminder, that episode was about the rebellion as it was led by Louis-Joseph Papineau in Lower Canada. We saw that the French Canadians formed the Parti Patriote in opposition to the English Chateau Clique's control of the government in Lower Canada, and that in 1834, led by Louis-Joseph Papineau, the Parti Patriote created its list of 92 resolutions, which were all rejected by the British government 3 years later. The Patriots chose rebellion, and Englishman John Colborne would lead the government troops against the Patriots. We saw the Patriot victory on November 23, 1837, where the British fled in armed confrontation with the Patriots at Saint-Denis. Then on November 25, 1837, the British defeated the Patriots at St. Charles and again at St. Eustache in mid-December. In support of the Patriots, a secret American society in Vermont and New York called Hunter's Lodge provided support but failed in their attempts at overthrowing the government of Lower Canada. Okay, the summary's out of the way, so let's continue with the rebellions of 1837 by looking at William Lyon Mackenzie in Upper Canada. As was the case in Lower Canada, a similar drama was brewing in Upper Canada. The ruling oligarchy, the family compact, dominated the government. Although most of their leading members were honest and determined in their efforts, they were also arrogant and anti-democratic in their approach. Robert Baldwin, a lawyer, and Egerton Ryerson, a Methodist minister, were both considered moderate reformers. Both tried to make reform headway with the government, but were blocked at every turn by the ruling clique. So eventually, more extremist reformers, led by newspaperman William Lyon Mackenzie, would become the voice of the people. Mackenzie was first elected to the Assembly in 1828, but was expelled by the family compact clique. Over time, he was re-elected and kicked out 4 times by the ruling Tories. Then in 1834, he became the first mayor of the newly incorporated city of Toronto, all the while denouncing the ruling families in Upper Canada. In York, Mackenzie became an outspoken critic of the family compact clique. He was opposed to the 3 million or so acres of lands that had been awarded to the Anglican Church. His heated editorials led to his offices being ransacked and his printing presses thrown into the lake. One member of the family compact even tried to have Mackenzie assassinated but failed. And following Papineau's example in Lower Canada, Mackenzie roamed all over Upper Canada collecting grievances. His 500-page report was called Report on Grievances and was equally explosive as Papineau's 92 resolutions were. Then came Francis Bond, an upper-crust Brit and writer who knew nothing about Canada. So the British Colonial Office appointed him Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada in 1836. He distrusted the reformers and believed strongly in good old-fashioned Tory values, a perfect opposition to Mackenzie. When reformers in the Assembly blocked funds to the government, Bond had responded by dissolving the House and calling a snap election. And rather than remaining neutral, as was called for of his position as Lieutenant Governor, Bond had campaigned for the Conservatives, using bribery and scare tactics to win over voters. And since only property owners could vote, he granted lands to known supporters. And it worked. The reformers were swept away in the election of 1836. Mackenzie's resolve hardened. He changed the name of his newspaper from the Colonial Advocate to the Constitution and issued a Toronto Declaration based on the American Declaration of Independence. Mackenzie then rode throughout the countryside urging rebellion. It was time, he thought, to march on Toronto, capture the government, and declare a new republic. In December 1837, more than 600 men gathered at Montgomery's Tavern on Yonge Street. It was good timing, the reformers thought, as Bondhead had sent his troops into Lower Canada to fight the Patriot Rebellion there. There was a small skirmish as Mackenzie's reformers marched down Yonge Street as they were met by a small band of local militia. 2 days later, Bondhead, leading an army of volunteers, converged on Montgomery's Tavern. The rebels were beaten and the tavern burned. Mackenzie escaped and fled south across the Niagara River into the United States and linked up with the Hunters' Lodge, the secret American society supporting the Republican rebellions in both Lower and Upper Canada. Mackenzie crossed back into Canada, landed on Navy Island in the Niagara River, where he raised a flag and declared himself president of the Canadian Republic. The Americans were happy and supportive, but British troops soon began bombarding the rebel base. In late December 1837, during the night as the battle raged, some Canadians rowed over to the American side of the river and set Mackenzie's supply ship, the Caroline, on fire. As it burned, the rebels cut it free and it was sent over the Niagara Falls. An American was killed by the Canadians during the scuffle and tension rose in the United States. Mackenzie had pushed Canada and the United States to the brink of war. More men died during the American-backed border raids into Upper Canada than in the original rebellion. About 1,000 rebels were captured, 20 were hanged, and more than 800 sentenced to prison. Any remaining rebels were exiled or banished to the Australian penal colonies. The government of Upper Canada had won. The American government had resisted the calls for war, and their Hunters' Lodge faded away. The British eventually pardoned Mackenzie, Papineau, and even Wilfred Nelson, and allowed them all to return to Canada. All three were re-elected to their respective assemblies, but their time as rebels was over. Papineau in Lower Canada still had influence and helped inspire young reformers who would form the Parti Rouge in the 1840s. They would later join with the English-Canadian reformers to form the Liberal Party of Canada. Although the rebellions of 1837 were little more than a series of armed riots, they helped set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to responsible government, not just in Canada, but throughout the British Empire. As stated by historians J.W. Chafe and Arthur Lower, the rebellions were American revolutions in miniature, and though at the time they seemed to have failed, they cleared the way for self-government, and just beyond self-government stood national life. Well, on that inspiring note, let's end this episode here. Please stay tuned for the next episode, episode 37, The Roads to Confederation, Part 1, where we look into the 1840s, the era of political evolution. Now remember, at any time, feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll do my best to respond to them all. And please, be a true Canadian and be polite. And if you like this content, give this video a thumbs up, and click that subscribe button below to see more. And remember to also hit the bell if you'd like to be notified of any new content. Thanks everyone, and have a great day. Okay.